The air in the sterile, glass-walled boardroom felt heavy enough to sink. I could almost taste it, that bitter blend of cheap coffee and quiet fear that clings to companies right before the axe falls. Across the long polished table, the executives from prestige marketing sat under fluorescent lights that were a little too honest. Shirts clung to damp backs. Pens clicked. Throats cleared. Someone tried to smile and missed. I watched them all, but my eyes kept drifting back to her. Jessica. Her blonde hair was immaculate, every strand smoothed into place by a comb and the need to be perfect. The tailor had done holy work on that navy suit. She looked like a woman built to win. But her eyes, those particular blue eyes I knew better than I wished I did, flickered then widened, then went strangely still. She had just realized who I was. 5 years ago, she left me with a text. Now, my nameplate sat in front of me at the head of the table. Ethan Hayes, lead strategist, Atlas Acquisitions. I let the silence live for a few beats. You learn things in silence. Where people look, how they brace, what they fear. Jessica stared at the placard as if it might rearrange itself into a different name. When it didn't, she swallowed and glanced at her boss. Harrison, Mr. Tansmile himself, had no idea any of this was personal. He was too busy being important. The man looked like a game show host pretending to be a CEO. Blinding teeth, sprayed-on confidence, and hands that kept smoothing a tie that didn't need smoothing. She thought it was a coincidence that we were in the same room. Fate doing one of its cute little tricks. She didn't know that I had planned every inch of this. For 3 weeks, I'd dissected prestige marketing like a patient that wouldn't stop bleeding. I knew the truth hidden in their spreadsheets. I knew which accounts were rotting, which campaigns were quietly failing, and which departments would drag the company underwater if they weren't cut free. I knew her department's spend and return in numbers so precise they felt like fingerprints. I knew Harrison's ego had been steering the ship toward open water and a storm line no one wanted to see. And I knew that the woman who once decided a gala mattered more than a human being would stand up in a few minutes and pitch me a plan to save her job. I wasn't here to observe. I was here to decide. Harrison stood, tugged his cuffs, and started with the kind of words that mean nothing when you're out of time. Synergy, trajectory, macro-environmental headwinds. The graphs went up on the screen and down in reality. He tried jokes. They thudded into the table like dropped rocks. He avoided numbers the way a man avoids mirrors he can't afford to look into. When he finally surrendered the stage, Jessica stood. Her laptop shook on the first slide and stilled by the second. She smiled, careful and bright. The presentation was fundamentally flawed, proposing a social media strategy that was years behind the curve. It was a weak attempt to rebrand failure as a new direction. She kept looking at me like she was trying to read a story written in a language she used to speak. I gave her nothing. The irony was almost too clean. She was pitching to me, unaware that I had come to dismantle the house she lived in. Atlas hadn't been hired to rescue prestige. We were there to carve it down to the bone, salvage what was worth saving, and absorb it. Trimming the fat is what the memo said. A phrase tidy enough to erase the fact that it meant people. Names, histories, mortgages. 50 careers lived inside my report. One of them had a face I knew by heart. I could have ended her with a paragraph, a line, a single sentence. And for a sharp, stupid moment, that idea landed with a rush of poison that tasted like triumph. Then it cooled, then it flattened, and then it worried me. Because I knew what that taste was. I'd seen it on her face once. I didn't want to wear it. Was I here to make the best decision for Atlas? Or was I here to be the consequence she never thought she'd meet? Could I do both? I kept my voice even when the questions started. I asked about numbers, timelines, campaign attribution. Harrison interrupted twice to resell me concepts I didn't buy the first time. Jessica tried charm, then competence, then a small tremble in her voice that felt rehearsed. We adjourned. I offered polite nods to a parade of faces I would instantly forget. When Jessica's eyes reached for mine one last time, I looked past her and said, "Thank you, everyone." That night, my hotel room was a rectangle of glass looking out on a city pretending not to be tired. The skyline blinked like a patient hooked to 1,000 tiny machines. I stood there long enough for the window to hold my reflection and the city both. The man in the glass wore a suit. His jaw was set in a way that said he didn't forgive easily anymore. Who even am I now? I asked him. He didn't answer. He never does. I paced. I replayed. I remembered the one night that had taught me everything I didn't want to learn. 5 years earlier, I was 23, that soft age where you think loyalty is its own armor. I had a second-hand laptop that ran hot and hope that ran hotter. Our apartment was small enough to know the weather by how the windows breathed. Jessica and I were us. The kind of us that makes you talk about futures like they've already started. She was ambition in heels. I was patience in hoodies. At night, I wrote code for a data analytics engine I thought could change how marketing understood people. Patterns clearer than guesses, insights honest enough to matter. She would be on the couch, scrolling, narrating office politics like a nature documentary. I was the person who made soup when she got sick, remembered how she took her coffee, fixed the wobble in the kitchen chair with a folded magazine and a prayer. We weren't glamorous. We were a stack of small kindnesses arranged into something that felt a lot like home. I thought love was building a life brick by brick. She thought love was something you step off when the next stare appears. The gala lived on the calendar like a holiday someone else believed in. "This is the night," she said a dozen times. "Harrison will be there. Big clients, big conversations. Could change everything." The night arrived, and the flu knocked me down like I'd been tripped by a ghost. Fever in the red zone. The ceiling spun in slow circles. Sweat and chills traded places. I couldn't stand without hearing a rushing in my ears like a train that wasn't there. "Please, Jess," I whispered, ashamed of how weak it sounded. I need you tonight." Her mouth softened, then pulled tight, like she was rejecting a gift she couldn't afford to accept. "Don't be dramatic, Ethan. It's just the flu," she said, adjusting earrings that were her mother's and ambition that was all her own. "This party is my future." She left perfume in the doorway and the sound of heels becoming distance. I woke up in a room that smelled like cold sheets and stale water. My phone lit my face. One text. "I think we want different things. This isn't working." No call. No conversation. No scene. Just a decision that erased me from its ending. I didn't know then that the gala wasn't networking. It was an audition for a life where I was already the wrong answer. I paid in hours I never got back. I coded because my hands needed to do something besides hold a feeling that had nowhere to go. The engine in my laptop grew teeth, then eyes, then a voice of its own. Someone at Atlas found the demo through a friend and then through me, and one quiet morning I went in wearing a tie I hadn't earned yet. They saw value. They saw structure. They saw a mind that didn't quit, or if it did, only to rework the problem from the other side. They hired me. The software turned into a product. The product turned into a method. The method turned into a reputation. By the time prestige marketing stumbled into our orbit, I was exactly the kind of man Jessica always claimed to respect. And that's what I hated, because I didn't build this to become something she could finally admire. The day after the meeting, I conducted interviews with her team. People tell the truth when they think they have nothing left to lose. I heard resignation disguised as professionalism. I heard good intentions smothered by management that didn't listen. I heard a dozen versions of "I tried," because nothing punishes the heart like effort that disappears. Then David walked in, mid-20s, nervous, but the kind of nervous that belongs to people who care. He had a black notebook with corners that had survived bags and subways and doubt. He slid it across the table with hands that wanted so badly not to shake. "I know I'm just a junior designer," he said, "but I keep track of ideas, things I think could work." He opened the book, and the room changed. Clean layouts, storyboards with timing marks, campaigns that could breathe on their own, concepts with guts, data-informed, not data-drowned. I recognized the look in his eyes, a mixture of hope and the memory of being told no. "Why haven't these shipped?" I asked. He smiled, ashamed on behalf of the people above him. "Too risky." Translation: too original to feel safe beside egos. "They're not risky," I said a little too sharply. They're right. And they're on time. He blinked. On time. On time, I repeated. For the world as it is, not as someone wishes it was. He laughed, surprised, then bit it back like he wasn't sure if laughing in front of me was allowed. David, I said, and I meant it. These will be in my report by name. Something loosened in his shoulders. You can watch hope return to a human being like light rising in a room. I walked out feeling clean for the first time in weeks. That feeling didn't get to stay. Jessica was waiting by the elevators as if the building had grown her there. Ethan, she said, voice tuned to a frequency designed to open old doors. I can't believe it's really you. I was such a mess back then. I've thought about you. God, I've thought about you so many times. Her hand found my arm with muscle memory she shouldn't have been allowed to keep. We were good together, weren't we? She breathed. Maybe we could help each other again, for old time's sake. I stepped back before my body remembered anything it wasn't allowed to. She wasn't apologizing. She was negotiating. What she regretted wasn't losing me. It was losing control. Please put anything work-related in an email, I said, letting the words sit on the polished air like a boundary she didn't expect to meet. Her smile flickered, then returned, tighter. Of course. She left, and the elevator opened, and I stared at my reflection in its brushed steel long enough to know a war had started. Harrison made his worst call 3 days later. He promoted her publicly, loudly, to project liaison for the acquisition. Her new mandate was poison dressed as process. Be my single point of contact. She followed me through days like a shadow with a press kit. In meetings, she spoke before I did. In hallways, she matched my pace and tried to match my tone. Oh, Ethan and I go way back, she'd say to my team, blinking innocence like a tactic. I understand how he thinks. To her colleagues, she played the misunderstood hero. We didn't work out, she sighed. But I wish him well. To my analysts, she played the insider. He likes clean visuals, she murmured, as if she knew my mind the way she once pretended to know my heart. I could shut her down and look biased, or I could let her run and look weak. Rumors bloom in oxygen you don't control. I started catching looks from my team. Not disrespect, just the practical curiosity of people whose jobs depend on the truth. Clara, my best analyst, asked me quietly, is there anything I should know for context? My only rule is this: we operate in the daylight, not in the shadows. She nodded. She trusted me. But trust is a muscle, not a law. I could feel it strain. What I lost that week wasn't status. It was narrative. I had arrived in their building as the person who decides. Suddenly, I was a character in her story again. That was the fall. Not down the ladder, but off the ground. I booked a flight home for the weekend. No one knew. I carried a small bag through a crowded terminal and felt heavier with every step. My apartment hadn't changed, which somehow felt wrong. The couch still leaned against the same wall. The plant in the corner had decided to live in spite of me. I sat on the floor because floors don't lie about how you're doing. I pulled out my old laptop because I needed a mirror for the mind. It woke like an old friend. Slowly, stubbornly, then all at once. The desktop was a museum of what I used to believe. Smiling photos I didn't trust anymore. Folders with names that sounded like promises. I knew where the buried thing was before I started looking. Of course I did. The week she left, I wrote paragraphs that bled. She replied with neat, tidy sentences that cut to the bone. Reading them now, the ache was gone. In its place was something colder and kinder. Clarity. She hadn't left because I was small. She left because she needed a stage, not a partner. An audience, not a witness. People like that drift upward until somebody turns gravity back on. So this stopped being about revenge. It became about not letting incompetence rent the future from people who hadn't had their chance yet. I made coffee that tasted like a midnight decision and logged into Prestige's archives. I wasn't hunting scandal, those flames burn bright and die fast. I was looking for pattern. I tracked budgets month by month like migrations across a map. I matched spend to results until the charts started telling the truth out loud. I found projects that burned cash just to feel warm. I found the footprints of a culture that punished initiative and rewarded imitation. When the screen turned to fog, I crashed on the couch for an hour and a half. Then I got up and built the deck I would present if I were the man I kept claiming to be. By sunrise Monday, the report was a machine. It didn't care about names. It only cared about choices. I walked back into Prestige with a different gait, because I knew exactly what sat inside my folder. First move, sunlight. I set a new rule: every conversation in the open, every email with my whole team CC'd. For alignment, I said on the record. Off the record, for honesty. Jessica tried to catch me by the elevators again, the same old choreography. I didn't let the music start. Send it in an email, I said, and held her glance long enough for the past to understand it was no longer invited. That afternoon, the numbers did what numbers do when you let them. I put 3 years of budget against 3 years of return. The slope told a story you can't interrupt. Then I added projections built from David's concepts, careful, tested, obvious in the way truth always looks after you stop lying to yourself. The air went thin. The room made that particular quiet that means the arguing part of the brain has packed its bags. Numbers don't always tell the whole story, Jessica said, smile stretched to breaking. They do, I answered calm. When the story is about performance. Harrison shifted hard enough to creak the chair. Sweat gathered at his jawline and didn't know where to go. He tried to sell me on brand legacy and market memory. I showed him the decay curve. He tried a joke. There wasn't a laugh left in the building. We adjourned, and the power in the room moved seats without asking permission. The final presentation was at Atlas, a glass box that makes truth look inevitable. 2 boards on opposite sides of the table, a row of managers who suddenly loved note-taking, assistants holding tablets like shields. I walked to the podium with the calm that comes when your evidence weighs more than your fear. Thank you for your time, I said into a microphone that made my voice steadier than I felt. First slide, the map. Second slide, the compass. You show people how you think before you show them what you found. Then came the sequence: revenue trajectory, attribution audits, churn narratives, efficiency indices. Each slide separated habit from fact. When I flipped to the section labeled marketing, the room braced. My recommendation, I said, looking at the people who had to hear it, is to dissolve the current marketing department due to a systemic pattern of inefficiency, poor strategy discipline, and leadership that's misaligned with the market as it actually exists. I didn't say her name. I didn't need to. Heads turned on their own. When I finally looked at Jessica, her face was discovering disbelief in real time. The color was gone, the jaw unsteady. I didn't feel triumph. I felt balance. However, I continued, opening the next door. Our audit uncovered a core worth building around. David's headshot filled the screen, younger than his work and older where it mattered. His concepts spread across the wall, bold, disciplined, alive. Data supported design instead of strangling it. I recommend a new, lean digital growth division built around these strategies, with David Chun as director. Silence. Then approval moved like a breeze through tall grass. Executives love to be early to a good idea when someone else will remember who was earliest. Harrison looked at the table as if it might forgive him. He didn't meet anyone's eyes when the chair asked 2 questions he couldn't answer. He didn't argue when they thanked him and asked him to hand in his badge. Endings are quieter than people expect. Restructuring is just paperwork until it isn't. Titles stepped down. Roles went dark. Jessica's position slid into a column labeled redundant, then into a file called history. Hallways are where you find the unfiltered truth of a moment. She stopped me in one flooded with bright light that made it hard to lie. How could you do this to me? She asked, mascara slipping. I was young. I made a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, I said, each word simple on purpose. It was a choice. You chose ambition over loyalty. Today, the company chose performance over prestige. We all choose. You chose 5 years ago. I chose today. For a moment, I saw the woman she might have become if she had ever valued something beyond her own ambition. Then it was gone. She blinked first. I walked to the elevator without turning around. Looking back is how you invite a ghost to keep you company. 6 months moved the way months move when the work is honest. The new division breathed like a healthy lung. David grew into the role that had been waiting for him. He hired people who cared, listened more than he talked, and shipped campaigns that made clients feel understood instead of targeted. Our results were the kind you present with gratitude, not swagger. We met on a Thursday at a cafe that liked windows and bright mornings. Conversations hummed in the background. David covered the table with sketches, laughed at the drafts that didn't work, and recycled them into the ones that did. He had the look of someone building from real bedrock. "Take a look at this," he said, flipping to a storyboard that made me forget my coffee. "Am I making the transition too clever?" "You're not," I said. "You're finally trusting the audience." He grinned, scribbled a note, flagged the page, already thinking 3 steps ahead. The future kept beginning while we sat there watching it. My phone buzzed. Another quarter. Another set of numbers that behaved the way numbers should when respect leads. I flipped the screen face down and let the good news be quiet. One afternoon, out of habit, not hunger, I typed her name into the LinkedIn search bar, just to see where she had landed. Different state. Junior sales title with fancy punctuation. It didn't make me smile. It didn't make me sad. It put a period where there used to be an ellipsis. I hadn't broken her. I had taken away the scaffolding she never earned. Gravity handled the rest. People like to say karma is a lightning strike. I've learned it's rain. It wears the mountain down one patient drop at a time. You don't hear the moment it wins. You look up one day and the shape has changed. In the window, I caught a faint version of myself. Edges older, center steadier. For the first time in a long time, I knew the man looking back. He wasn't built by who left or who fell. He was built by what he chose to build and who he chose to protect. He chose light even when shadow would have been easier. "Ready?" David asked, collecting pages already halfway to tomorrow. "Yeah," I said, finishing the last of the coffee. "Let's go make something honest." We stepped outside into a city that had remembered how to be spring. I didn't feel lighter. I felt anchored, the right anchors this time. I was free, not because I'd won, because I'd stopped needing to. Thank you for listening to my story about consequence and return. If you believe integrity finds its way home, hit like and subscribe for more. Was this justice or too cold? And remember, the strongest foundations are built on loyalty and integrity.